The pDAI community are preparing to make contact and submit a proposal on pMaker that would result in the peg of pDAI. In this video, I will run through a very quick recap of how we know pDAI is a Richard Heart project, the recent activity on MakerDAO on Pulsechain and what the implications are, the community's proposal to peg pDAI, and in this section I will run through what the proposal is, why it would peg pDAI, and the proposal process itself. Finally, and most importantly, I will go through why the pegging of pDAI is central to the success of Pulsechain and everything on it. So first, the quick recap of how we know Richard is behind pDAI. We can see on chain that he minted the extra pDAI supply, increasing it from 5 billion to 22 billion. We know this as it was pre-coded to execute at launch. We tracked 2 addresses directly from the Pulsechain GitLab, the code repository Richard's team used to develop Pulsechain. And we saw that the AMM bot address minted at least 500 million pDAI, and the comprehensive accounting address minted at least 4.6 billion pDAI. That's 5.1 billion of the pDAI that we have directly accounted for, and that is through millions upon millions of transactions on chain through these addresses. Also, we can see on chain that Richard took over MakerDAO on Pulsechain. We know a wallet ending 2822 is Richard's, as it received 6.7 trillion PulseX and 6.3 trillion Pulse at the time of Pulsechain's launch. To have this much, this wallet would have had to sacrifice $5.1 billion worth of crypto, and at the worst possible price during the sacrifices. This is Richard's wallet. And we can see he used it to coordinate and assist in the takeover of MakerDAO on Pulsechain. This is a flowchart of the steps that were taken to take over MakerDAO on Pulsechain. I'm not going to spend time on this as I cover this in detail in my previous video, but Richard's wallet had the ability to block the eventual takeover of pMaker. But instead of blocking it, he used his holdings to enable it. If you want to understand more about this section, watch my previous video titled Richard's Stablecoin. There's been some really exciting developments recently on MakerDAO on Pulsechain, but I don't think the majority of people have fully grasped the implications of what's been happening. The pDAI supply had been set at 22 billion for over a year, but on the 22nd of September, the supply began to increase. There was panic amongst the community, and people who were against pDAI were quick to come out and call it a scam. In a matter of days, the supply went from 22 billion to 22.8 billion. So what happened to cause this? Someone was taking out a flash loan from the balancer protocol. A flash loan is a loan that you can take out and then pay back within the same transaction. This is the transaction that was being carried out. Someone began by borrowing amounts of pUSDC, which was priced at 0.0018. They then were depositing the pUSDC into pMaker, minting pDAI, which at the time was priced nearly 70% higher at 0.0026. They were then taking that higher priced pDAI and swapping it for a larger amount of pUSDC than they had taken out as a loan. They used a portion of the pUSDC they now had to repay the flash loan they had taken out. All within the same transaction. This resulted in profit and increasing the price of pUSDC. And they did this until on the 25th of September, both pDAI and pUSDC were the same price. They pegged pUSDC to pDAI. And they've remained pegged ever since, with this process automatically triggering when there is a price difference. What does this tell us? Firstly, it tells us this is how Richard plans to peg the other P stables. pDAI will be backed by assets, which we will cover how later. But PUSDC and PUSDT will not have anything backing them. Instead, when they fall in price, this automated process will kick in and bring them back to the same price as pDAI. Now, I want to stress the importance of what we've just seen. For over a year, there was no change in the supply of pDAI. Now, the supply has increased. This was because Richard, who has control of pMaker, turned the minting function on. And it worked. It minted pDAI. Do you remember the main concern from people like HTP was that there was no working oracles on pMaker? Well, now there are. An oracle is a piece of software that tells MakerDAO the value of the contents of its vaults. MakerDAO on Pulsechain now has a working oracle, and it is minting the correct amount of pDAI as a result. What does that mean? It means that the technical work is complete. MakerDAO on Pulsechain is now working. But of course, pDAI isn't at $1. So, there is one final missing piece. And this is where we step in. The community's proposal to peg pDAI. Let's run through the proposal, the process for getting it implemented, and why it would achieve the peg. First, what do we need to peg pDAI? There's 22.8 billion pDAI in circulation. We need 150% worth of collateral in the vaults to peg pDAI to $1. That is $34 billion worth of crypto assets. Now, the way that MakerDAO works is if you wanted to mint DAI into existence, you would need to deposit 150% of collateral into a vault. So if you deposited $150 worth of crypto into a Maker vault, you would mint $100 worth of DAI. When someone mints DAI into existence, they open themselves a personal vault, meaning no one else can interact with that vault. If the user wanted, at a later date, they could redeem their DAI for the assets that they deposited. But their personal vault is only accessible to themselves. And this is how MakerDAO works. There are lots of individuals who open personal vaults, minting themselves DAI, and leaving crypto assets in those vaults. Now, the state of all those vaults are monitored by an overall accounting layer called the VAT. The VAT looks at all the personal vaults and calculates whether the amount of collateral in the vaults are worth 150% of the supply of DAI. It works as a simple if function. The VAT says, if the collateral in the personal vaults adds up to at least 150% of the supply of DAI that is in circulation, then DAI equals $1. And it's oracles that communicate this price throughout the market. An oracle within an automated market maker on exchanges, for example, will read from MakerDAO that the price is $1 and reflect it in the DAI within its liquidity pools. That is how DAI has worked for the past however many years. So, what can change the price of DAI? Would selling pDAI once it's at $1 change its price? Well, if the personal vaults are 150% of the circulating supply of pDAI, then no. Selling pDAI, or more accurately swapping it, would not change the price of DAI, as it hasn't affected the if function that MakerDAO uses to determine the price. Could liquidations of personal vaults have an effect on the price of DAI? Yes, because it affects the if function by which MakerDAO determines the price. If one of the personal vaults had collateral that dropped in value below the 150% over-collateralization mark, the if function would be at risk. So to mitigate for this, MakerDAO would take the assets from the liquidated vault and burn them. This reduces the circulating supply of DAI, getting us back to the overall position in the personal vaults that satisfies the if function. 150% over-collateralization in the vaults. So today, there's 22.8 billion pDAI in supply. That means we need $34 billion worth of collateral to satisfy PMaker's if function and be 150% over-collateralized. Where would we get that amount of crypto assets? The OA. The value of the OA bags at the time of this recording is $17 billion. That's 50% of the amount required, meaning we're only a 2x away in the core coins from a peg of pDAI being feasible. And Richard has control of the price of the OA bags. He already told us this. Price moves as a square. If you double the liquidity on one side of a pool, you 4x the price of the other asset. He says you can literally see me adding liquidity and the price of the core coins going up. He said this in March of this year, when he pumped the OA bags to a total value of $52 billion. So what is our proposal? Currently, the community are forking the front end of MakerDAO, so we have it on Pulsechain, and we can interact with it. We will then create a proposal and submit it to Richard and the community for approval. The proposal will do two things. Add the ability for personal vaults to be opened for Hex, Pulse and PulseX, and for there to be a pause on the pDAI minting functionality. This will allow Richard to move his OA bags into personal vaults on PMaker. And the pause on the minting function would mean that the pDAI supply would remain the same, whilst the collateral in the personal vaults would roll up into the VAT, satisfying the 150% minimum over-collateralization threshold, thereby completing the requirement for PMaker's if function, and therefore pegging pDAI to $1. We will follow the existing MakerDAO process for our proposal. First, there will be a poll. This poll is to ascertain whether there is support for our proposal amongst the community and Richard. This is a written proposal with no code yet developed for it. We will set a 2-week period for the poll, where it's live, where the community can add comments and vote to show their support for the proposal. And we are hoping that Richard and or his team provide comments that get us to where they want the code to be for the next stage for implementation. Should it pass, and the community have illustrated there is support for this proposal, we move on to an executive vote. The executive vote has code that is submitted and stored in a smart contract. Should the executive proposal be voted through, the smart contract automatically would implement the code held within the proposal. To achieve the peg, the OA would then need to move its bags into its own personal vaults on PMaker, with the minting function paused when they do so the supply remains the same. And that's the plan to peg pDAI. Why is pegging pDAI so important? What makes it central to the success of Pulsechain and everything on it? Well, let's look at what happens once Richard collateralizes PMaker and the 22 billion of pDAI is worth $1. Remember, the supply distribution is roughly 5 billion pDAI in circulation. 5 billion has been copied over from Ethereum, and Richard has around 12 billion. And putting to one side the fact that pDAI holders will rush into core coins, Richard himself can buy the coins with some of his 12 billion pDAI. Let's say he 10x's the price of Pulse, Hex and PulseX by putting $5 billion worth of bids in. As he has backed pDAI with the same assets he has increased by 10x, the value of the collateral in the vaults would increase by 10x. The 52 billion will now be worth 520 billion. That means we would be 2,280% over collateralized, way above the 150% minimum threshold. So he can then increase the amount of pDAI he takes from his personal vaults. Let's say he mints up to 100 billion pDAI. We would still be 520% over collateralized, still way above the minimum threshold. And the if function would still be satisfied. Therefore, pDAI would still be $1. Again, he can use the pDAI to put more bids in, lifting the price of the core coins by another 10x, lifting the value of the contents of the vaults by another 10x. And he can just keep doing this. And this is the whole point of pDAI. Richard is creating himself a money printer. He can continually add stablecoin liquidity, keep putting in buys for all the core coins and all of the PRC20s, bringing them to parity. We don't need anyone else. We don't need anyone from Ethereum or Bitcoin coming over and speculating on Pulsechain. And we're a 2x away from this being possible. MakerDAO is working perfectly. All the technical work is complete. And he posted this just over 4 weeks ago. He has control over the price movement of the OA bags. The last time he posted this, the OA bags went to $52 billion in total. This is bigger than number go up. This is part of Richard's master plan, his magnum opus. What did we sacrifice for? The freedom of speech, the freedom of movement and assembly. Coder's speech. By submitting this proposal, the pDAI community are exercising their rights, and in turn playing a role in the implementation of the world's only truly decentralized stablecoin, free from government interference, making Pulsechain the most decentralized blockchain the world has ever seen. We are asking nicely. We are the network. The future is as good as we make it.
If you look at a stablecoin backed by crypto, I'm probably going to release a stablecoin at some point, so I don't want to give away all the tricks. So, I'm rewarding people that have political beliefs that align with my own. And as time goes on, we have other things on the roadmap, like nation state. I think you can make a better nation. It's going to be god awful hard. So maybe the time frame is like 5 or 6 years from now. But why not? Why not carve out a special economic zone? That's how Shenzhen started. That's how Hong Kong started. Get a special economic zone somewhere and bang it out, do something miraculous there. So that's on the roadmap too. But stablecoin and wallet and OpenSea replacement, things like that will come before that.